Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto is banished from Konoha and joins Kumo Harem Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The next day Naruto woke up after a full mind sparring with the beast known as Kyuubi. Naruto didn't stand a chance. The fox had lived for thousands of years and probably has an equal amount of jutsu at its disposal. He got up and changed into his training gear. He planned to make most of the time he had because he knew something was going to happen soon. He didn't know when or where, but he knew something wasn't right. Maybe he was overthinking things. Well, when it comes to him, it'd probably be best to assume such things since the Akatsuki and Orochimaru are still out there. The blonde went into his kitchen and made some eggs with pancakes and bacon. He made sure his stomach was satisfied before he went into his clan's library. Darui-sensei said to meet him at the training grounds inside the Raikage mansion. I wonder why the guy would build one inside it. Anyway, I better release my clones and sort through the knowledge. He thought and went upstairs to find the door that said, Namikaze Library. He put his blood on the seal and entered, where he found his clones still reading books and scrolls. Hey, boss, a clone yelled. Then all of their attention turned to him. Alright, put the books and scrolls away and dispel yourselves 10 at a time with a 10-second interval. They all nodded and soon the room was being flooded by smoke. The quietness that is in usual libraries was broken from the loud, popping noises that happened every time a clone was destroyed. Soon he was gaining memories of the scrolls and books that they read. The instructions on many new Ranten jutsu that he was sure Darui-sensei wouldn't know. There were also scrolls on Jikuukan, Suiten, Futen, and many more Raiden ninjutsu. He also found many more different kenjutsu styles that were created by his clan. There were styles for using two swords at once. That appealed to Naruto since he recently gained an interest in using his new blade. There were many notes on fuinjutsu as well, instructions and basics on the sealing arts and how to make basic tools like explosion tags and sealing scrolls. Naruto may know how to put stuff in a scroll, but actually making them would be a great asset since he wouldn't run out of scrolls and therefore, he could carry all the stuff he would need for battle or training trips. Wow. Didn't think they'd get this much knowledge in a night. But what to start on? Kyuubi started me on the basics of the Fox Fist Taijutsu that he knows. Before you ask, he thinks the Kyuubi is male because of the booming voice. He said to himself as he was now in a thinking position. Abruptly, he snaps his fingers. I'll start on sealing. Learning jutsu and all that jazz will be no problem with Kage Bunshin, but I don't think that would work with fuinjutsu. Let's get started. For the next 2 hours he would sit in the library and practice the basics of his clan's art. It was not an easy one. Practicing brush strokes to make sure the kanji seals are aligned correctly. Making sure the array was set up correctly was another one of his tasks. But nothing practice couldn't fix. After that he walked to the grounds where he was supposed to meet Darui at. The trip would have been faster, but along the way he was chased by his new legion of fangirls and was thanking Kami that none of them were kunoichi. That would have been even more of a hassle. When he did finally get there, he saw his sensei talking to Samui. He was a little surprised at her presence as she didn't usually see him. Hey, Naruto. Darui said in his usual lazy tone as he just raised an open hand at the blonde Namikaze. Ohayu, Naruto-san. I've been instructed to help you in kenjutsu. Samui said with her cold expression, but her voice didn't sound bad at all. At least, not to Naruto. He always wondered why she rarely smiled though. Hey, Naruto greeted back with a bright smile. He looked at Darui. So which one are we starting with? Ranten or kenjutsu? Samui quickly got out her sword and charged at Naruto. She began slashing, causing the blonde to dodge until he got out his sword and blocked some of Samui's strikes. Not bad, but he needs to be faster, much faster. You mind warning me next time? Naruto yelled at Samui. An enemy won't warn you, so this is to get you ready. Samui said, her expression not changing. You need to be faster. I held back, so I could have easily killed you. Naruto let all this sink in. Then he gripped his swords tighter and held it, pointed at his new teacher. If that's how you want it, he charged. Then I'll give it, he yelled as he appeared in front of Samui. Her eyes widened at the new speed, but she still blocked his strikes. She was waiting for a chance to make him stumble, but he wasn't leaving many openings to work with. She had to admit to herself, his offense was good, even for an amateur. But, Ken Rendon, Samui yelled and suddenly disappeared from Naruto's sight. She then appeared from behind and gave him barely a second as she began a barrage of slashes aimed at potentially dangerous areas. Luckily for the Namikaze, his reflexes were always good, but he did end up getting a few shallow cuts on his arms since Samui had superior speed. When the last, but most powerful, strike came, he was sent into the wall of the training field and made a small crater. That knocked the air out of him. He looked at Samui, her cold expression still evident on her face. He wondered what kind of move that was. It was fast, unpredictable, and damaging. Something that he would totally want to learn. Once he regained his breath, he stepped out of the wall and made his way back. He stood in front of his new Kenjutsu teacher and waited for her to say anything. You were not bad, she said to him, making him smile. But not good either. You have a solid offense until you come up against something more powerful. Your defense is poor. We'll work on that until you're assigned a team by Raikage-sama. Naruto nodded and got back into a stance. I'm ready to go again, he said, determined. She nodded and attacked again. It would be another couple of hours, leaving a tired Naruto and Samui by themselves. Darui was ordered to go the Raikage mansion, so it was just those two, training. He made those hours count as he learned new defense moves and even some of the Kenjutsu techniques that Samui knew. Granted, he didn't master them, but she was impressed with the way that he got the concept of the techniques so fast. It was like he was made to become a swords master. He surprised her even more when he came up with moves that she had no idea were capable. He's impressive. If he keeps on impressing me, I just may end up flirting with him. As I said before, she only has a cold expression, doesn't mean that she can't have fun. I thought a little bit of a flirty nature would be good for her anyhow. Despite always losing against Samui, Naruto was having fun. In fact, it was the most fun he had since the training trip he took with Ero Sennin. He missed messing with the old pervert, but this new training was beneficial to him as well. He didn't even know about Kenjutsu that much until he got his new sword. You're getting better, Naruto-san. You're at least low Chunin level with Kenjutsu now. But I'm not stopping until you're at my level, she said to him, smiling a bit. She rarely did that, but, somehow, she couldn't help it around him. She respected him as a fighter now, so maybe that had something to do with it. What's more, he didn't say anything about women not being capable kunoichi. So, same time tomorrow? Naruto asked. He really liked sparring with his new teacher. I'd like that, but I am still responsible for Omoi and Karui. Training and all that, she said to him. Well, how about we train together? You can use my clan's training grounds. That way, you're with your team and you can show me what I'm doing wrong at the same time. Naruto asked with a grin. It was a brilliant suggestion if he did say so himself. Samui thought about it. There wasn't really a downside to this, but that didn't mean she couldn't milk the offer. Let me use your hot spring and massage my shoulders every now and then and you've got a deal, she said back with a smirk. Naruto blushed at the massage part, but if it was for training, then it was a small sacrifice. Besides, who wouldn't want to go along with massaging a beautiful woman like Samui? They'd have to be crazy, or a brooding emo that has a superiority complex. He nodded and she smiled again at him. The busty blonde looked good smiling. Well, I have to go. It was nice training with you, Naruto-san. Omoi, Karui and I will be here tomorrow at the same time. Samui said and shunshined out of the field. Now the blonde Jinchuriki was alone, left to his own devices. What to do? What to do? Well, I could learn more jutsu or work on perfecting the Rasengan. According to Tu-san, it's incomplete. But I want to be able to do it with one hand before I start on that. And then there's the Hiraishin, man, what should I start on first? Then he suddenly smacked his palm on his forehead. I'm an idiot. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he yelled. The field was covered in smoke and his clones, of 200, were waiting for their orders. Alright, 50 of you work on doing the Rasengan one-handed. Another 50 looking for new jutsu and learning them in the library. Once you find some, come here and practice them. I'll need another 50 working on more advanced chakra control exercises. Practice them along with the ninjutsu group. And the last group will work on the Hiraishin. Now let's get going. He yelled, but none of them moved. What are you going to be doing, boss? A clone asked. Working on kenjutsu, of course. You guys can't do it since you can't transfer muscle memory. Now get. He yelled again. They saluted and did as they were told. The real Naruto looked up at the sky. It's still early too. Man, there isn't really much to do anymore. At least in Konoha I could do missions. XXX. Sasuke was sitting quietly in his room, ready to go to Kumo and take the power that he believed was rightfully his. Killing Naruto would just be the next step in his quest for vengeance. He would avenge his clan, even if it meant killing the only person who saw him for who he was back in Konoha. That thought made him scoff at the thought. Naruto was an idiot, and he always will be. The world was more than likely to be better off if he was gone. He was happy to oblige that. Then his door opened and Kabuto walked into the door. His usual smirk was gone and he didn't fix his glasses this time. Signs that show that he is not in a relaxed state. Orochimaru-sama is postponing the trip to Kumo, he said, and that made Sasuke snap his head at him with his Sharingan blazing. Why? The Avenger yelled. What is his reason for this? We are low on forces right now and, to go against Kumogakure, it would be suicide for us. Even if we are led by a Sannin. He just needs more time to gain more shinobi forces before we leave. That way, the plan he is working on will be foolproof. Kabuto said. That and his health isn't getting much better. If the change isn't done soon, he will die, permanently. Sasuke scoffed. Very well. But it better not take long. I don't like to keep waiting. He said, and the silver-haired medic nodded and left. Once he was alone again, he charged up a Chidori and hit the wall ahead of him with it. He needed to let out some of his anger. XXX. Hokage Mansion Office. Tsunade sighed as she sat at her desk and sipping on sake. Usually she would be gulping it down, but she's been a little depressed since Naruto's banishment. That, and Shizune would yell at her again for being irresponsible. She's also being troubled by the council, or rather the civilian side of it. They kept demanding that Naruto be returned to Konoha and rebuild the Namikaze clan here as it was the Yondaime's home. She countered that they should not be demanding anything of her since she is Hokage and they had no power. It was their own fault anyway, and Tsunade was going to make them pay for it. Konoha as a whole was definitely being punished as well. The economy has taken a turn for the worse since the blonde was forcibly exiled. Shinobi wouldn't do missions unless they were ordered to because they feared they would be exiled as well if they failed. Trade routes to other countries were cut off. Places like Suna, Nami no Kuni, and several other of the lesser countries that Konoha relied on for fruits, vegetables, exports of food. They still had a few, but Tsunade was amazed at how Naruto's banishment affected those countries. So she began investigating since, from the records, she read that Naruto had not done much in the missions that happened in those countries. She read that it was Uchiha Sasuke who did all the work. When she got the mission reports, she saw several discrepancies and called in the remaining members of Team 7. Kakashi and Sakura were surprised at what were written in the reports. The silver-haired Jonin was even more so, since he was the one who had written the reports, when he saw that there was a change in names in mostly all of them. Even the D-ranked ones. Tsunade had called Shizune in and asked where the reports went to after they were submitted by the Jonin sensei. They're sent to the Shinobi Council for review and then they are filed away in order and kept under lock and key. She said, getting a nod in reply from the Hokage, and left to continue her work. The blonde Sanin sighed and realized that only 3 other people besides herself had access to those reports and files. Those were the elders of Konoha. One of them were illegally rewriting mission reports. A serious crime since they were only meant to be reviewed and not edited. Now, she was waiting for the 3 old wrinkles she knew as her advisors. But they really didn't do anything to help her. Koharu took her job seriously, but the other 2, Danzo and Homura, always seemed to have their own agenda. Her door opened and Shizune poked her head into the office. The elders are here to see you, Hokage-sama. She said simply. Send them in, Tsunade said, nodding as she did so. Koharu, Homura, and finally Danzo were now in the office and were curious to see what the Hokage had wanted them for. The 2 male advisors seemed impatient though. I've called you 3 in here for something on a matter of security. Tsunade started. But first, I have to start with the village's slowly falling economy. She would have continued, but an old war hawk had interrupted her. What does our security have to do with our economy, Tsunade? Danzo asked, and a subtle vein grew on her forehead. That's Hokage-sama to you, Danzo, and I was getting to that. Now shut up, she said, and he scoffed at that statement. Our trade routes are being closed with several countries when they heard about Uzumaki Naruto's exile. That got me thinking how one boy could have such an effect on those countries. She continued. That was when I began reading the mission reports and called in the remaining members of Team 7, Haruno Sakura and Hitaki Kakashi. Kakashi read them and said that it was not what he had written in his reports. I then asked Shizune about where the reports went to and found out that only the people in this room had access to those files. She said, and silence followed. Danzo did well to hide his distress with his stonewalled face, but was inwardly fuming. It was just one of his backup plans in order to have a weapon for Konoha to use properly. If Uzumaki wasn't doing a satisfactory job as a ninja, he could have had leverage for the council to give the boy to him and train. But it didn't matter now, as the boy was banished and was on the War Hawks hit list. Homura was not as good as Danzo, as he was sweating bullets. It was actually him who did that by the order of Danzo so that he could solidify his place at the side of the new Hokage, Danzo, as his most trusted advisor. Koharu showed no emotion whatsoever, almost as if she were some kind of robot, which was uncharacteristic of her since she was usually the more emotional one of the trio. Care to explain? Tsunade asked. We have no idea what you're talking about, Hokage-sama. None of us have stepped in the building with those files for quite some time. Danzo said in a believing tone, but he knew Tsunade did not trust his words. Yes, that's true. Right, Koharu? Homura asked the female advisor. Hi, that is correct. She said in a robotic tone. The other 2, Danzo and Homura, nodded at her. That was when Tsunade sighed. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but, she said, and called Shizune into her office again. Can you bring in the shinobi who guards the mission reports for Team 7, please? Hi, Shizune said, and it didn't take her long to get the chunin. After about 10 minutes or so, a brown-haired man that was wearing the standard chunin outfit that consisted of Anbu-style pants and shirt, along with the flak jacket, stepped in. This man was named Taisuke Furukawa. The chunin saluted to the Hokage, who then put him at ease, and he asked why he was here. Have you seen any of the advisors in the past 2 to 3 years? She asked the man. Taisuke simply raised an eyebrow and then nodded. Hi. Homura-sama visited a few times, saying he needed to review some of Kakashi-san's reports. You see, The Chunin had a perfect memory of who and when a person went into the safe to read the reports. That was why he was chosen for the job by Kakashi. Tsunade glared at the elder. She then looked back at Taisuke and dismissed him. The man saluted and left. The blonde Kage stood up and went around her desk. She glared at all of the advisors, believing that it was just some ploy to get Naruto out of Konoha. Anbu. Restrain Homura and interrogate him. Have Ibiki do it. He could use a new toy. She ordered, and a Neko, bear, and hawk-masked Anbu appeared. They acknowledged the order and took the now struggling elder away. The Kage's attention then went to the two remaining ones. You two can go, but if I ever see you meddling in the reports or any other sort of paperwork, then you best be prepared for the punishment. She threatened with a strong killing intent. Even Danzo had nearly keeled over at the gravity of the strength of her ki. Kaharu was sweating as well. Dismissed, she said, and the two left. Tsunade then sat back down and leaned into her chair. Even when Naruto isn't here, they try to screw him over. That got her thinking. She was the Hokage. No one was supposed to be getting away with things like this, even if it was minor. It was on this day that she decided to start cleaning house in the council and in many other places. She chuckled to herself with an evil grin. Those bastards won't know what hit them. XXX. Danzo was back in his office and was gritting his teeth in anger. He had not expected for one of his pawns, Homura, to be caught at doing something that was so fickle. And he knew that Homura did not have as strong a mind to fend off Ibiki. What was he going to do now? He knew he did not have as many forces as he used to since the Sandaime had disbanded Root, but he was slowly rebuilding it. But he still needed a few more months in order to get the sufficient amount of ninja under his control. The old war hawk then began planning his next move. Maybe he could somehow get Kaharu, who he controlled with a seal that he made himself, to convince the Shinobi Council that it wasn't that severe of a crime. Who cared about a few mission reports being edited anyway? It wasn't going to be easy, but he hoped they would listen. That, or he would have to start his little coup earlier than he planned. And that's it for this chapter. I know it's been a long while and I'm sorry for that. I hope this chapter is good enough for now, guys. This isn't as long as all of the other chapters, but I sort of didn't want to drag it out and make it boring. But I do promise that the next chapter will be as long as the other chapters, but there will also be a time skip and more interaction with Samui and Naruto. And maybe he'll finally find out about the CRA. Who will the girls be? Well, I'm making a poll, so here will be the choices for you guys to choose from. But Samui and Yugito are already in, so they aren't in the choices. Female Kyuubi, with enough votes I think it would be a good addition. Mabui, Reikage's assistant. Tsunami. Kuratsuchi. Shion. Koyuki. Fubuki, she's from the first Naruto movie. I think she's hot and I could always say she was being controlled by the bad guy in that movie. Mei. Amaru. Gurren. Anko. Yugao. Fu Jinchuriki of the Seven-Tailed Beast. Ayame. And finally Tamari. If I missed anyone you guys like, you can make requests, and that is that. So Naruto is getting into his training and there is trouble in Konoha. When will Danzo put his plans into action and attempt a takeover of Konoha? How long will it take for Orochimaru to build up his forces and still stay alive in the body he has now? Will Sasuke get impatient? Find out in the next Namikaze of Lightning. The Konoha 10-1 was, currently, at a training field and training together so as to improve some of their techniques as well as their teamwork in case they were sent out together on missions. It was actually a very smart strategy and was thought up by Shino, the usually quiet one. All of them have been training hard ever since the blonde known as Naruto was exiled because of the mission to try and retrieve Sasuke from Orochimaru's hideout. They all thought it was a stupid reason, but the civilian council was stupid. Even when it concerned the blonde's heritage. The truth about Naruto's parents was revealed to the whole village, and to say the civilians were in an uproar was an understatement. They had begun shouting that it was a lie when it was announced by Tsunade at the Hokage mansion. A quick, but potent, dose of killing intent by the busty cage set them straight and made them see the light. She asked them how they could not see the difference. She asked them to compare the Yondaime's statue to Naruto, without whiskers, and see what they got. A collective gasp showed that they now believed it to be true. Of course, there were still a few non-believers and yelled that it was just the work of the fox to make him look like their hero to ridicule them. Tsunade had never been so angry before in her life. When she started hearing the non-believers start breaking the Sandame's law, she began imprisoning them for long periods of time because the last thing she needed right now was more pressure from the council. She did make sure that they did not have a chance to be trialed though. That part got the council pissed and her happy. But back to the Konoha 10. They were mostly newly promoted Chunin while a few others were Jonin, like Hyuga Neji. They were all getting stronger though, using their loyal blonde friend as motivation. The one who really took to using him as motivation was Hyuga Hinata. She had been training since the day Naruto was banished. Even Hiashi was impressed with the way she was improving. She didn't rival him in the Juken, but she was now beating her younger sister, Hanabi. She was actually getting close to Neji's level of chakra control and Juken power. Shino already trained hard but honored his comrade by keeping the others safe and mastering his clan's techniques and jutsu. He'd even developed some new hybrid insects that would allow him to suck out the chakra of his enemies just a bit faster than normal. His father, Shibi, was stoically impressed with his son's new abilities. Kiba, self-proclaimed rival of the Dobi, started learning ninjutsu that would help him in case his clan jutsu did not work. It was actually a smart idea on his part, the others stated so. Turns out he was a Doden user, a commonality in the Inuzuka clan. But he was still training in the element's chakra manipulation. Shikamaru actually felt bad at Naruto's leaving since they used to hang out together at the academy and watched clouds together with Choji. He thought it was troublesome to train but couldn't help but to, as he wanted to be stronger for his friend. He began taking taijutsu lessons with Guy and Lee since he had a weakness in that area and created a few of his own cage techniques. Tsunade actually wanted to recommend him for the Jonin exam if he continued. Ino wasn't really a friend to Naruto but still felt bad for her fellow blonde. No one deserved to be wrongly punished like he was. By now, she's working along with her father in the interrogation department. She got to see some of her father's techniques in action. She did not, however, like to see any of Mitarashi Anko's techniques at all. She was really grossed out by some of them. Choji actually laid off eating for a little bit for he was in a depression. Naruto was the first person he met that didn't judge him by his weight. It was actually though him that he met Shikamaru and became best friends with the two. His family grew worried for him and convinced him to not be sad for his friend, but to get stronger for him instead. So he did just that and began increasing his clan jutsu knowledge and made some variations of his own. Sakura, the last member of her age in Team 7, was depressed for a long while. She kept thinking that it was her fault that her friend and teammate got banished. If she wasn't hurt, the council wouldn't have had anything to use as leverage against him when they banished the blonde. Thanks to Ino and Tsunade, she was brought back out of it and began taking her medical arts in a more productive way. She made her own taijutsu style, which is still in progress, which allowed her to break a person down by to such an extent that not even Tsunade would be able to heal her enemies. She was able to test this new taijutsu on some enemy Oto ninja that tried to ambush them on one of her missions. That guy was definitely not going to be doing any ambushing for Orochimaru ever again. Lee, also being a rival to the blonde, started training even harder, if that was possible, and began learning Jonin-level taijutsu techniques from his sensei. He was actually becoming quite the taijutsu practitioner. Guy was actually having a challenge in defeating his student now. Tenten never really got to know Naruto but she did admire some of his qualities. She thought of him to be a very unique, yet, true shinobi. He had the will of fire deep within him and protected his friends with fierce determination. She only started noticing him until after the Chunin exams all those years ago, as it was his fight that made Neji into a new man. Now, he didn't even talk about fate and was on good terms with Hinata now. But the blonde didn't affect her enough to start going into overdrive in her training. She was pestered by her green jumpsuit-clad sensei and teammate about getting more serious though. So just to shut them up, she began learning ninjutsu and found she was a Raiden element. Something useful for her weapons, even though she was still working with the chakra manipulation training. But now, Kiba and Shikamaru were sparring with each other in order to better their techniques in jutsu. The Inuzuka started using ninjutsu in the fight and made Shikamaru dodging left and right at the repeated shots of the Doden, Doryuden no Jutsu. The Nara sighed. So troublesome, he said lazily as he was running around the training field and trying not to get hit by the mud bullets of the jutsu. Hey, what's wrong, Shika? Don't like having mud in your hair. Kiba taunted but was inwardly sighing as his chakra reserves were getting lower. He did eventually run out and was bound by Shikamaru's cage main no jutsu. Said Cloud Watcher walked up to his comrade. Your strategy could use some work, Kiba. Even Naruto wouldn't blindly waste his chakra on a jutsu that would repeatedly miss. He said, not knowing of the blonde's rapidly growing improvement. Akamaru barked at his master from beside him. The dog was staying away from the jutsu that Kiba kept using. Yeah, I get what you're saying, boy. I'll make sure to do better next time, Shikamaru. Kiba said and rubbed the back of Akamaru's head when he was released from the jutsu. They walked back to the others, who were all mostly standing up. Some others like Hinata, Ino, and Sakura were sitting down and talking to each other. They had grown close as to help each other in their problems and techniques. You are improving in your accuracy a bit there, Kiba-san. Tenten said to him with a smile. The dog-like ninja rubbed the back of his head. Arigato, but it wastes my chakra too fast. Why can't I have chakra reserves like Naruto? He yelled at himself and crossed his arms. The others just laughed. Kiba was no Naruto, but some of the qualities were in him, and that was a good refresher for the other Chunin and Jonin. Speaking of him, how do you think he's doing in Kumo? I heard he became a Chunin just a few days after he got there. Ino said. Everyone was shocked to hear that, as they don't get many updates about Naruto since they're not exactly on good terms with Kumo. Tsunade would just assure them that he was fine where he was. Whoa, so the Dobi finally got promoted, Kuso. Now I got to train harder so he won't upstage me. Kiba yelled, shaking his fist. He merely got slapped in the back of his head by an annoyed Neji. You don't always have to yell, Kiba. He said in his usual, but polite, Hyuga tone. Kiba rubbed the bump that formed on his head to try and ease the pain. Fine. But what about him being promoted? Come on, you have to tell us, Ino. Sakura said, a little happier at hearing her friend being promoted. I heard from a reliable source that Naruto had to take Kumo's unique rank assessment test and fight one of their Chunin. I don't know his name, but I know that Naruto made a good show and got promoted. Nothing specific on what he did though. The Yamanaka said, putting a finger on her lip in the end. She was curious to how Naruto won the fight. Yosh. Naruto-kun's flames of youth are still burning brightly. Lee yelled and was then slapped in the back of his head by Tenten. Geez, can't you calm down for one day? The bun-haired Chunin asked with her brow twitching. Her teammate merely grinned and gave his usual thumbs up. No can do, he said back, and everyone's sweat dropped. Why did Guy-sensei have to corrupt Lee with that crazy youth thing? Shikamaru sighed. Anyway, if Naruto's doing well, then that's all we can ask for, right? At least they treat him better, he said, and everyone nodded. Never would have guessed that he was the son of the Yondaime though. That one actually shocked me. That made everyone nod at the same time. Even if the man had enemies, Naruto should have at least been told about his family rather than find out about them the day he was leaving the village. They wondered why the Sandaime never did so when he was alive. Well, I've got to go. My shift at the weapons shop starts soon. Tenten said, waving goodbye, and left. Everyone else took that as a cue to leave to their own devices as well and make sure to come back again when they weren't all on missions. They were actually the only ones who did take them voluntarily because they didn't want their skills to dwindle. XXX. Oh, Naru-kun, said the busty Samui in a seductive tone. She and Naruto were in his room. He was sitting on his bed in his usual clothes and she was in nothing but a see-through nightgown that showed her black bra and panties. She bent over a bit and teased him a bit with her cleavage. Naruto swallowed hard at the sight. He had never been in this type of situation before and was freaking out. But he did have a crush on Samui and would relish the chance he could have with her. She began walking with an extra sway to her hip and she saw her fellow blonde just staring at her with a mesmerized expression. His eyes were half-lidded and he was practically drooling. The busty blonde giggled and when she was close enough she put her index finger under his chin and made him close his mouth. She then leaned over and whispered into his ear. Like what you see, Naruto-kun. You can touch if you want, she said, straightening back up. The Namikaze sat up slowly and put his hands on her hips. He stared at the beautiful woman in front of him and leaned in to kiss her. He closed his eyes when he saw her pucker and it felt like an eternity to him. When their lips finally met, he was in heaven. Her lips were so soft and warm. She moaned into the kiss and then his hands began to wander. They instantly went to her firm and he softly kneaded it like dough. Samui responded by grabbing a chunk full of Naruto's hair and nearly forced her tongue into his mouth. The Kyuubi vessel was a little surprised but he just went with it like he always did. Their tongues intertwined and began battling for dominance. It ended with Samui being the winner but she stopped so they could both breathe. Samui then pushed him lightly on his chest and made him sit down on his bed. She smirked seductively and got onto her knees in front of him. I think it's time for these pants to go, don't you think? She asked in that same tone that made his spine tingle. He nodded dumbly and began undoing his belt but was stopped by his soon-to-be lover. She shook her head at him and he simply raised an eyebrow. But he was answered by the look of her eyes that said that she wanted to do it herself. Slowly, teasingly, she undid the belt and slowly took his black Anbu-style pants off. They went off quite easily. She saw the boxers with fox heads on them and giggled. He simply blushed at what was going on. The busty Jonin then started to rub the inside of his thighs and kept getting closer until she was at her goal. When she did, she took off the boxers and was lightly tapped on her forehead by her prize. She gasped at the size of it. He was at least a little over 8 or 9 inches. Don't know if that's good or not. This is actually my first time writing this stuff. Samui then smirked and looked up to the blue eyes blonde. Is this for me? She asked and her hot breath covered his length. He gasped out of pleasure when that happened. Let me take care of it for you, Naruto-kun. That was when she grabbed his appendage with her right hand and began to rub it slowly. She felt it throbbing and the heated sensation her hand got when she did so made her aroused. After a bit more teasing she started licking along his length and made sure to coat every side with her saliva. Samui-chan. Naruto gasped in pleasure. He couldn't believe that he was getting his first blowjob. Ero Sennin would be so proud. That's if he ever found out though. Samui put her lips to the tip and then slowly lowered her head and took as much of him into her throat as she could. She heard him moan from it and was happy to keep him feeling that way. So she then took her head back up and then brought it back down. A slow, bobbing motion became her pace. Naruto was, again, in heaven at the sensation he was getting. He never expected this to happen so soon. But he didn't complain at all. He could see himself wanting more things like this from Samui. He soon groaned and squints his eyes. He was getting close. Samui-chan. I'm gonna, he started to say but she didn't stop. The busty blonde increased her pace and wanted him to release his seed into her awaiting mouth. When she felt the throbbing become more violent and then spasm, she felt her reward going into his mouth and down her throat. He came so much that a little was dripping out of her orifice. She took his length out of her mouth and began drinking the white fluid she was yearning for. That was delicious, Naruto-kun. Now it's your turn to make me feel good, she said and straddled his waist. He didn't argue as he flipped her over and moved her to the middle of the bed, where he took off his cloak and black shirt and headband. Naruto arched his back and then began kissing Samui again, their tongues battling yet again. He left her mouth and chuckled when she pouted at him for stopping. But he just smirked and began kissing down her chin and felt her writhe under him in pleasure. He sucked on her neck and made sure to leave his mark. He went lower to her upper chest and then he finally got to what he was sure is everyman's dream of doing to Samui. He slowly unhooked her bra and her perky, yet firm, bounced and revealed themselves to him. The blonde just gaped at the size of them. They were at least a high D cup. And they looked like they rivaled Tsunade Ba-chan's. Slowly, he slid his hands along her stomach and then cupped the magnificent mounds of flesh. She moaned when he began kneading them like he did her cheeks. Oh, she moaned. That's so good. Lick them, she said, practically ordering him to do so, and he was happy to oblige. He leaned more and put his mouth over her hardened nipples. He then began to suck on them with fervor, as they tasted good to him. Samui practically screamed from the pleasure she was getting. Never has she felt this good in her life. She was happy that it was Naruto doing these things to her, no matter how perverted they were. More. He licked the nipple of the right, the one he was sucking, and twirled his tongue along it in different directions. Then he started on the other and did the same with that nipple. Naruto saw his lover getting wet and could feel her panties becoming soaked. She couldn't take it anymore. Naruto, I need you. I want you to put it inside me, she yelled as he was sucking on her. Anything for you, Samui-chan, he said as he took off her last piece of fabric and aligned himself with her, now soaked entrance. He was about to enter and begin the best night of his life when. Beep. 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 Naruto jumped out of bed and sat up. He began looking around and then noticed that he was sweating. Ah, damn it, I was getting to the good part too. You know, if you keep dreaming of doing her, why don't you just ask her out? I know you've been wanting to since like 2 months ago. The Kyuubi's voice said into the blonde's head. But what if she says no and then doesn't want to speak to me anymore? I couldn't stand that, Naruto yelled, his arms waving in the air. He had actually been having dreams like this with both Yugito and Samui but didn't think that Yugito had that kind of feelings for him. But he was actually able to notice some subtle hints from Samui. She would blush a lot when he gave her massages and sometimes moan in pleasure too. He felt awkward every time that happened. The blonde Namikaze then got up and put on his gear and prepared to finally complete his training with Darui-sensei. He had been training hard in the past 3 months and knew that the results were showing. He was able to get the Fox Fist Taijutsu down a lot sooner than the Kyuubi expected, but he did have help in his mindscape training. His abilities there were transferred into his real body and mastered the style last month. He could now say that his fighting style was as unpredictable as he was. His ninjutsu, he was proud to say, was at elite Jonin level. He knew many different jutsu for his affinities, which were Suiden, Raiden, and Fuden. His list of jutsu were mainly offensive, but he did know a few defensive jutsu as well since he would definitely need them. Kenjutsu was now at least on Samui's level. Since he practiced all the moves she taught him in his mindscape, he was able to master techniques and was now able to give her a run for her money now. She would still win out of experience though. He did win a few times though. The Hiraishin was now mastered and was now mastering Rasengan. He could do it with one hand and even made a Fuden element type with it. Since he mastered the manipulation training for his affinities, he decided to make a lightning and water type Rasengan that looked like different weapons. It was hard to keep the chakra manipulation and the shape changing under focus though. Naruto got a treat from Kyuubi by being able to sign the Kitsune summoning contract. He didn't even know there was one, but it turned out that the Kyuubi was the boss and allowed him to be the summoner. It said that it would start him on the Fox Sage training when it deemed him ready, which was becoming closer as the days go by. His now favorite art besides ninjutsu, fuinjutsu, was now at least up to Ero Sennin's level, and he could call himself a seal master that his clan was proud of. He even used him for training. He used resistance and gravity seals to increase his strength and speed. His speed was only rivaled by the Raikage, as he was now the fastest person alive since Minato was dead. But when Naruto used his Raiden no Yoroi, he was faster, but only by a bit. Speaking of his Raiden no Yoroi, he found that his was very unique. When he activated it a couple of months ago, he found that the electricity had changed color from blue to a bright gold color and blue lightning arcing around him. I was astounded at what he saw and only grinned when he challenged the younger blonde to a spar that day. Of course Naruto happily accepted to it. All in all, he was a happy and strong ninja that made Kumo proud. He traveled to his training grounds and saw that Darui was alone. The man simply put a hand up, his way of a greeting. Naruto did the same with a grin. "Hey sensei, where's Samui-chan?" Naruto asked curiously. Darui chuckled inwardly. He found it amusing at how close he was getting to Kumo's Ice Queen. She was only rivaled by Konoha's Kurenai Yuhi. She had a mission to attend to with her team. She'll be back in a few days. Anyway, it's time for your final phase of Rantan manipulation. Rantan manipulation was the only thing that Naruto was having trouble in. Since it was not an element he was familiar with, he had only to rely on scrolls and Darui for help. But he was finally going to master it today. "You see those dark clouds above us?" The silver-haired Jonin asked and got a nod in reply after Naruto looked up. "If I'm right, then you should be able to control them and make real lightning, not chakra-made lightning. Real, more devastating, natural lightning," he said, and Naruto was awed. The blonde nodded and held both of his palms in the air. They were pointed toward the clouds. He grit his teeth and began concentrating. Blue chakra began to envelope his body before it turned into a golden color. He, unintentionally, activated his Raiden no Yoroi. But the clouds began to turn darker and thunder boomed in them. Then there were bright flashes in the clouds, showing that there was lightning building up in them. A bolt struck near Naruto's position, but the blonde wasn't scared. He was so focused that he didn't even notice it. Another bolt then struck him, but it did not harm him. He opened his eyes, which were now the same golden color as his armor, and then pointed his hands at one of the walls at his training grounds. The effect was instantaneous as the same bolt of lightning that struck Naruto came out of his hands and hit the wall and destroyed a good chunk of it. Darui was amazed at what he saw in front of him. He didn't know that Naruto would become a real live lightning conductor. But it was effective in a way. Naruto returned to normal and saw his sensei with a rare smile on his face and clapping. "Congratulations, Naruto. You have now mastered the Rantan manipulation training. If you learn more jutsu from your clan scrolls, then you shall be a true Namikaze," he said and bumped fists with the blonde. An Anbu appeared next to Darui after that though. "Raikage-sama requests your presence, Darui-san. Please get to the Raikage mansion when you can," the tiger-masked man said, and the shunshined away. The silver-haired Jonin sighed. "Again? Man, this is like the third time this week. So dull. Anyway, Samui-san and Yugito-san said to meet them later for celebration. Said they knew you would pass." Darui chuckled and then disappeared in a shunshin of black lightning. The blonde grinned and couldn't wait to meet his two favorite Kumo girls and celebrate. He always met them after missions at their favorite restaurant that served many different foods. He liked it since they had ramen, not as well as Ichiraku's but well nonetheless. "Time to go then," he said to himself and shunshined in a flash of black and white lightning. He called it his Rantan Shunshin. Only he would be able to do that version. XXX. Orochimaru's lair in Rice Country. The sickened snake Sanin was sitting on a throne he fashioned for himself at his headquarters. In front of him were about 350 of the best Odo ninja he found all around the elemental countries. With this small army, he would attack Kumo and get Sasuke to kill Naruto. Then, he would take his chance and make Sasuke his new vessel. His plan was perfect. He sent Kabuto to tell the Uchiha the news and knew that he would be happy, even if he didn't show it. The silver-haired medic Nin opened the door to Sasuke's room and saw him brooding on his bed. He was just sitting at the edge with his elbows on his legs and his fingers laced in front of his face. Always with the brooding. It's almost as annoying as Naruto-kun. What do you want? Sasuke demanded more than asked. His onyx eyes shifted to Orochimaru's second in command. The forces are ready. We're setting off for Kumo in 2 days, so get ready. Kabuto said, fixing his glasses, and then left. The Uchiha smirked and then continued on with brooding. Just 2 days, and then he would finally gain the Mangekyo and finally receive the power to kill Itachi. He just needed to be patient for a little while longer. Well, there you go guys. I know it's not much of a chapter, but I just needed a filler to show where Naruto's skills were, and I just decided to have the Konoha 10 put their input on the blonde's banishment. Since there are only 10 members left of the Konoha 11, since Sasuke and Naruto are now out, it is now the Konoha 10. I hope you guys didn't have to go all the way here to find that out. Raikage's office the next day. Are you sure about this, B? Asked the man in front of him with a dead serious expression on his face. The man had platinum blonde hair, just like and was styled the same as well. He also had a dark skin tone, which was common in Kumogakur. He wore black, oval-shaped sunglasses over his eyes and the Kumo Hitai 8 with a white cloth on his forehead. His left shoulder had a kanji tattoo that read, iron, on it. He wore Kumo's standard one strap over one shoulder flak jacket, and a long, red rope belt tied around his waist, the standard Kumo hand and shin guards, shinobi sandals, and a white scarf around his neck. This man was Killer B, the brother to A and the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi. B nodded as he crossed his arms. He, too, was also serious, which was rare for him. His usual disposition was him doing his enka rapping like he always does and acting carefree. But this was too grave a situation for him to be like that. How many? And how long? I asked as he laced his fingers in front of his face and set his elbows on his desk. They were separated. The group I saw contained at least 10 shinobi. I couldn't tell their ranks from my position in the mountains. There could possibly be more than that. I estimate them at least a day away. The Hachibi Jinchuriki said to the Raikage. A hum to himself as he contemplated on the situation. Why would Odo have a squad so close to Kumo's borders? Were they planning an attack? If so, then he would have to ready the defenses to the village. Did they see you, B? The muscular Raikage asked. The reply he got was B shaking his head and then grinning. They can't see me when I hide because I've got ninja stealth on my side. The younger of the two said in a rapping fashion, waving his arms in front of him in order to make him look more convincing. The chance for this rap was too good for him not take it. The blonde Cage's eyebrow twitched when he heard his brother's reply. Not a day goes by with B always coming up with those stupid enka raps. Get serious about this, B. He yelled at his brother, who followed the command immediately. Get Naruto, Samui, and Yugito in here. Killer B nodded and then disappeared in a shunshin of lightning. When the container of the Hachibi left, Asaiden leaned back into his chair. I'd say that I'm too old for this shit, but then I'd sound like an old man. He said to himself and then stared at his door. You can stop eavesdropping and come in, Mabui. He smirked when he heard her make a high-pitched squeak and then saw her enter with a blush on her face, obviously from embarrassment. He had sent her out when B had appeared in his office with that serious look. The Cage knew that she was listening in, and he was sure his brother knew too, but since she's sort of his advisor besides being his assistant, he let her listen in. Besides, this way he wouldn't have to repeat anything to her. The silver-haired woman named Mabui took her usual place standing by his right shoulder. Why did you have B get Naruto-kun and the others here, Raikage-sama? She asked in a curious tone. Naruto-kun now is it, Mabui-san. He chuckled when he saw her blush on her dark skin. Anyway, I want to get some information from him before I do anything. But I am wondering what that snake, Orochimaru, is trying with this. For all we know, this could be a full-on invasion. Mabui nodded to her superior. I think it would be wise to think that, Raikage-sama. I wouldn't put it past the Sannin to try and invade us like he tried to do with Konoha a few years ago. But I can't think of any motives. She said to him after she gathered her thoughts. She saw him nod and then straighten up in his chair. She knew why, because she felt a few chakra signatures coming closer. It didn't even take a second later when B appeared back in the office and was followed by Naruto, Samui, and Yugito. Naruto and Yugito both wore confused, yet curious expressions on their faces, while Samui's showed no hint of emotion, which wasn't really surprising. It was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki who decided to speak first out of the three. What's going on, A-san? I was in the middle of training, he said, tilting his head slightly to the side. Naruto was confused because he was usually never called into the office without a reason. If he was, it was usually because the Kyuubi's training methods would sometimes go hectic, to say the least. This doesn't leave the room unless I say otherwise, understand? The dark-skinned Kage said with authority in his tone. All of his shinobi, besides B, straightened up and were now waiting on him to tell them why they were called. Oto Nin were spotted by B nearing the village at a fast pace. He got a gasp from Naruto, Yugito, and Samui, a reaction much to his surprise from the cold Kunoichi. The group he saw consisted of at least 10 ninja and is at least a day away. Had B not seen this, we would have never seen them coming. He said, and saw the three of them take on their own looks of contemplation about the situation. Naruto was already assuming one reason why Orochimaru would suddenly try to invade Kumogakure. The blonde had guessed that Sasuke had either demanded or convinced the snake to come here so that he could try and gain the Mangekyo Sharingan. That bastard of an Uchiha will rue the day he chose to invade our new home for that despicable dujutsu. Kyuubi roared behind its seal. Naruto nodded in agreement at what the kitsune had said. Both Yugito and Samui were thinking along the same line as Naruto, since he had told them both about how Sasuke had threatened to kill him in order to gain the next level of the Sharingan. It was actually the only reason they could think of as to why Oto would have a squad, and who knows how many so close to the border of Kumo. The blonde Namikaze was the first to speak his thoughts. I think I know the reason why the snake is attacking us, Raikage-sama. A raised an eyebrow. It was because he was both bewildered and curious. He was bewildered that Naruto had called him such a respectful title, and he was curious because he would like to hear what the blonde thought. Go on, he ordered to the Namikaze. I think it's because of Uchiha Sasuke, Naruto said, and heard the Raikage groan in annoyance. Sasuke has always wanted the power to kill his brother, and in order to do that, he needs to kill me. It's the only way for him to gain the same eyes that his brother, Itachi, has, the Mangekyo Sharingan. The blonde explained to his superior. If that's the case, then we need to strike before they get to us, Yugito said, putting in her 2 cents. Samui nodded at this strategy, in full agreement. Letting them destroy our village would not be cool, she said in her same emotionless tone and unchanging expression. The Raikage seemed to disagree with this from the way he gritted his teeth at them. And how do you expect us to do that when even our censor Nin haven't even reported anything to us yet? We're lucky we were even informed of this attack. He yelled at them and saw them lower their heads in thought. He took those few moments to calm down himself. The last thing he wanted to do was lose his head before an invasion. Samui-san, what level do you think that Naruto-san is at right now? B asked Samui, breaking out of his unusual silence. He was laughing inwardly, though, at the shocked face that his busty student made at him. Well, she said, resting her chin on one of her hands as if in thought. I'm a high Anbu level kunoichi and he can give me quite a challenge when we go all out in spars, so he's maybe close low to mid Anbu level right now. Why do you ask, B-sensei? Samui finished with a curious tone in her voice to her sensei. B smirked and then grinned at everyone. Then why don't we just take the fight to them before they get to us? We take them out now and they won't be a fuss. He rapped and nearly everyone's sweat dropped at the horrible rhyme he made. The only one who didn't was Naruto because he just laughed in amusement at B. But when they were done being annoyed at the rap they realized at what he said and their eyes widened. A was the first to voice his opinion on what his brother said. Didn't you just hear what I said, B? We have no way of knowing how to find their numbers. The cage said to the guardian of Kumo, expecting to see him quickly wipe that foolish grin off his face. But he was deterred when B didn't even so much as twitch at him. You won't have to send a huge force at the snake, bro. Just send us 4 to take out the leaders, yo. We can use our Biju to find their chakra signatures quicker than you can say, no. The container of the Hachibi rapped again to the Raikage, who hummed to himself to show that he was thinking over his plan. I actually thought it was a good plan. Take out the leaders of a large force and the subordinates will crumble from disorganization. He was sure that B could take on the Sannin and was also confident that Naruto, Samui, and Yugito could handle themselves against the snake's subordinates. As he thought of Orochimaru's subordinates, he quickly pictured the Uchiha traitor that was among them. Sasuke was an unknown to him because he didn't know how strong he was at the moment. He sighed to himself as he realized that it couldn't be helped at the moment. I'll just have to rely on them to be able to handle themselves for once, the cage thought, and then looked up at the 4 blondes. Alright, you have my permission to go along with B's plan. Be ready to depart within the hour. And if any of you die, I'll drag you back from the Shinigami himself and kill you again. Dismissed. He yelled and they all saluted him and disappeared in a shunshin. Naruto took a little longer, though, because Mabui gave him a quick peck on the cheek for good luck, and then he disappeared in his Rantan shunshin with a small blush on his cheeks, which made a smirk at him. He waited until he was sure everyone was gone before he decided to tease her a bit. You know, I was just kidding when I said you could be a possible candidate for Naruto in the CRA 6 months ago, right? The Raikage said cheekily to his silver-haired assistant. Mabui blushed a little and then quickly went back to her desk outside his office, her eyebrows twitching at how I was laughing at her as she did so. Stupid old man, she thought to herself. XXX. 20 minutes later, Kumo front gate. B had been waiting for at least 5 minutes for the rest to arrive. The others were most likely getting in stealth gear for the mission, which was a smart thing to do. He would have changed gear too, but he thought he was much too a badass to do such a thing. That overconfidence of yours is going to be the end of you, B. The Hachibi wisely said to his container. Yo, it's not overconfidence, 'cause I am a badass, faux show. The guardian of Kumo rapped in his head, but on the outside he was still using his arms to make the rap look more official. He was lucky that people saw him do that whenever he was in town, so they paid it no mind. Anyone else, and they would assume that he had just broken out of an insane asylum. B got an annoyed groan from his tenant. The Hachibi wasn't a fan of the dark-skinned Jinchuriki's Enka-style rapping. It annoyed the Biju so much that he had to keep up his own mental block so that he wouldn't have to hear his cantainer's incessant thoughts of new raps. It was all the man thought of. He only talked to B when he needed to and nothing more. That was their relationship and it worked for them. The Hachibi container was interrupted from thinking of the new rhymes he was going to make by the 3 presences that made themselves known behind him. He knew who they were because he had been waiting for them in order to start the mission. B turned his head with a grin across face. They had indeed put on some new gear for the mission. Naruto had chosen to wear a Kumo-styled Anbu outfit that consisted of a loose, black long-sleeve shirt and the same color loose-fitting pants to match. He wore the white, one-strapped Kumo flak jacket over the shirt. He wore the classic black shinobi sandals on his feet since he was accustomed to those. On his forearms and shins were bracers that were white with black trim. To finish off his outfit was the cloak that his father gave him, waving wildly behind him. Samui donned her old Anbu outfit that looked the same as Naruto's outfit, but she had to adjust her flak jacket a bit because of her well-endowed assets that were located on her chest. But unlike Naruto, she chose to wear a mask over her face that reminded the Kyuubi Jinchuriki of Kakashi's since it covered everything but her eyes. Yugito had also put on Kumo's Anbu outfit, but hers had a slightly different color scheme. It was black like her two partners, but hers had dark blue tiger-like strips that licked the edges of both her shirts and pants. She had also put two of the same marks on each of her cheeks, making them look like whiskers. The three looked at each other to see how they looked. Samui and Yugito both lightly blushed at Naruto's outfit because it made him look almost heroic in their opinion. Although, they were thankful that B couldn't see their blushes from Samui's mask and Yugito's face paint. Naruto was able to hold back his blush from the way his two female friends looked in their new gear. But it was only barely that he was able to. After all, they were two of the most beautiful women in Kumogakure, and they were also two of the deadliest. Two things he liked in kunoichi who took their careers seriously. You look good in the outfit we got you for mastering Ranton, Naruto-kun. Yugito said with a smirk because she got the blush she knew he was fighting to hold back to come out on his whiskered cheeks. I agree with Yugito, Samui said with an unusual smirk of her own. It fits you well. She finished as she crossed her arms under her, unintentionally lifting them up at Naruto, which made his face go even redder. Arigato, Samui-chan and Yugito-chan. Naruto stuttered before they all turned to B, who was still grinning at them, and waited for their orders. Killer B turned back around and had Hachibi try to locate the largest chakra signatures around the village's border. He knew that Orochimaru and his henchmen were most likely masking their chakra, but they were still no match for the Hachibi's sensing abilities. It didn't even take a minute before the second most powerful Biju of the 9 told him which direction to go and then closed the mental link. B nodded and then made a gesture with one of his hands that told the others to follow his lead. He could practically hear them nod before he dashed in the directions he was given. Alright, so here's how it goes down. B started as they dash around the rocky paths around the village. He knew these borders like the back of his hand, so they weren't going to get lost anytime soon. We fight the people that my bro said to fight and help each other out if you finish your opponent early. Do y'all dig? He said in regular speech, for once. That's fine with me, Naruto said with a determined expression on his face. I was planning on fighting Sasuke anyway, ordered or not. I've just been itching to finally settle things with him. Are you sure you're going to be able to kill him, Naruto-kun? Samui asked, but her tone sounded slightly worried. You did say that he was your old teammate after all. Naruto nodded as he kept his eyes in front so that he didn't accidentally miss a step and fall down one of the crevices. Mountains were dangerous like that after all. Yeah, I had a discussion similar to this with the Kyuubi. I made a promise to bring him back to Konoha, but I'll kill him if I don't have a choice. Samui nodded at the whiskered Jinchuriki and then looked ahead as she continued to follow her former sensei. XXX. It was nighttime by the time B and the rest of the group got to the camp that Orochimaru was at. The Hachibi container was sure that the snake was there because it had the same chakra signatures that his Biju had led him to. From what they could see from the cliff they had perched themselves on, there were at least 20 Oto Nin in the camp along with their 3 targets. And from their chakra levels, they were all most likely high Chunin to Jonin level ninja. This is going to be tricky, Yugito whispered to the others, who nodded in agreement. How are we going to do this? Naruto asked quietly as he surveyed the camp in order to try and find some infiltration points. He didn't just train in ninjutsu and kenjutsu all these 6 months. He was practically ordered to train in many different areas by the Raikage because the man wanted Naruto to be a well-rounded shinobi. Killer B hummed as he thought of their next step in taking down their targets. Any plan he came up with, though, would result all of them having to fight the entire camp anyway. Yo, Naruto, he said to the whiskered blonde. Do you think you can take down all of the henchmen with your Hiraishin, bro? Naruto's eyes widened at what the man had asked. As far as he knew, he never met Killer Bee, but the man knew that he was able to use his father's technique. Then again, he was A's brother, so he figured that B was informed about him and his abilities. The blonde slightly nodded his head to the sunglass Jinchuriki. I think so. It'll be easy to take down the Oto Nin, but as soon as I do, I'm sure that Orochimaru, Kabuto and Sasuke will know what's going on. So you three are going to have to distract them when that happens. Yeah, I figured that would happen. Yugito said with the same quiet tone but then smirked. I'm ready. Samui nodded along with her. Her expression was unknown to the others, but, under her mask, she was lightly grinning from excitement. I too am ready to begin the ambush. B grinned and then stood up. All of the others followed soon after. Time to get this show on the road then. He said a little louder now since it didn't really matter. That was when Naruto threw multiple three-pronged kunai at the camp and then disappeared in a flash of yellow. The screams of Oto Nin followed not even a moment later, showing that Naruto was succeeding in taking out all of the Sannin's henchmen with the Hiraishin no Jutsu. The rest of the group began to get in their stances when they saw their targets come out of their tents to see the commotion. The battle with Orochimaru was about to begin. Hey guys, I know it's been forever since I updated and I apologize for that, but college had me busy for the whole semester. But, I was able to use my winter break to write this out for you guys, and I know it may not be my longest chapter, but if I kept writing, I would have kept thinking of different scenes that could be added and whatnot. Now, for anyone wondering about some parts in the chapter, don't worry. Everything will be explained in either the next one or over the course of the story. Either way, they will be clarified. And I hope you guys like the new outfits I gave Naruto, Samui, and Yugito for the mission. They're not permanent though, but I may have them go into those outfits for big missions like this one. The Oto Nin didn't stand a chance when Naruto had ambushed them at their own camp. They were not expecting to be found out this quickly at all and were hoping to stay hidden from Kumo's forces so that their invasion went off without a hitch. Too bad that they forgot that Kumo isn't known for being one of the strongest of the elemental countries for nothing. The sight that Sasuke, Kabuto, and Orochimaru came upon when they exited the confines of the main tent, where they were making plans, was a blonde blur cutting down all the security in the camp like they were flies. He was moving so fast that their eyes couldn't keep track of him, making it futile to try and find out his identity. Orochimaru was gritting his teeth in anger as he watched this all happen. Those were some of his best soldiers that he was sure could at least give Sasuke somewhat of a challenge, and this thing had taken them all out in seconds. Who is that? He yelled at the two remaining at his sides. Kabuto had a permanent frown etched on his face. If one of the Sannin isn't able to detect whatever or whoever has infiltrated their camp, this was bad. No, this is worse than bad. He slowly put a hand to his kunai holster in fear as he didn't know whether he'd be dead in the next second. The last of the trio, Sasuke, still had an impassive expression on his face. He didn't care about the shinobi being slaughtered. But he did wonder what the jutsu that was being used was. It seemed so familiar to him that it was disturbing. He then shook his head. It didn't matter. He would just kill the fool ambushing them and take that power for himself. Then, I will surely be strong enough to kill Itachi. He thought with a smirk. After the Oto Nin were all gone, the blur had suddenly disappeared from the camp and none of them could trace to where it had gone. They tried using chakra to increase their senses, but the attacker must have gotten out of their range. XXX. The group's hiding spot. Naruto appeared back to the group in the same flash of yellow that he used to attack the camp with. He was surprised to find himself not even fatigued in the slightest. The blonde thought that it must have been due to the training he not only did in the village, but with his biju as well. The results were definitely worth it. Killer B was looking over the cliff to see the damage and whistled lowly when he saw all of the bodies. It wasn't a gory mess like he was expecting from a person who has barely killed before. All of the spiky blonde's attacks were quick and precise, just how a ninja should be. He grinned up at Naruto and put a thumb up in order to say, "Great job." Without having to actually say it. They were still in hiding after all. He looked back to find the remaining enemies in the camp when he saw Naruto nod at him. Orochimaru was still searching for the culprit that had nearly taken out the entire camp within a couple minutes. His expression was one that showed anger, due to him gritting his teeth and the contorting of his pale-skinned face. B was enjoying seeing one of the Sannin in such a state. His right-hand man, Kabuto, looked more frightened than he did angry. He probably thought that he was also going to die along with the rest of the Oto Nin that Naruto had killed. Honestly, B couldn't blame the guy because the Hiraishin is a devastating technique, no doubt about that. And he heard that Naruto was still working on it as well. And finally, his gaze turned to the Uchiha. Sasuke was also looking around but not as cautiously as he should have. He was turning his head in all directions, but in a slow pace that showed he was underestimating the enemy by a great amount. Wasn't he trained by a Sannin of all people? Wasn't he taught to never underestimate an enemy no matter the circumstance? All in all, B wasn't impressed by the Uchiha at all. Naruto is definitely going to kick his, yo, he thought and then turned back to the group, who were waiting for his orders. Man, he loved being in charge sometimes. The Hachibi Jinchuriki nodded to them with a wide grin. Let's show them not to mess with Kumo, he said with excitement and caused them all to feel the same as they nodded and jumped down the cliff to hide behind the rock formations that surrounded the camp. Killer B soon followed after them. The true ambush had finally begun. XXX. Orochimaru's camp. Now that the group was hidden, they just had to wait for B to start his attack in order to try and separate Orochimaru from Kabuto and Sasuke. The fights would be much easier that way. Divide and conquer was an excellent strategy for this situation. But, they were still dealing with one of the legendary Sannin here. Simple plans like that just won't cut it against a shinobi like Orochimaru, if he were in a rational state of being, that is. They were going to exploit his flustered state to their advantage. B jumped up high into the air and morphed one of his arms into an octopus tentacle. It was one of the many things he could do since he trained in controlling his Biju's powers and abilities. He would have to get Yugito and Naruto to train on the Shimagame, Island Turtle, when all of this was over. He made his new appendage grow to a larger size so that it could do some real damage. The tentacle was now twice as big as Killer B but was still being easily lifted by the man, showing his strength. After he enlarged his arm, he thrust it down to where Orochimaru and his cohorts were standing. Orochimaru, however, sensed the attack coming and shouted a quick warning to Kabuto and Sasuke, and they all were able to dodge the attack at the last second. And thus, the first part in the plan had been achieved. The three were now separated from each other and taking them out would be much easier. The Hachibi Jinchuriki used his speed to appear where Orochimaru had jumped to and tried to hit him again so that he could do some serious damage to the Snake Sannin. But, Orochimaru was able to parry the attack, although the force of the blow still made him skid back a few feet. You. The pale-skinned man snarled at B. Were you the one who did this to my ninja? His teeth were gritting in anger now and his fists were clenched with just enough pressure to make his own hands bleed. B simply grinned at the Sannin and answered in his normal fashion, which was Enka rapping. Yo, I'm Killer B and I'm here to make you see why you won't beat me. This is my home you're trying to invade, so for that you'll meet my blade, S. He finished with a somewhat embarrassed look on his face for not rhyming at the end of the rap. Orochimaru was so stunned by the absurd introduction that he was just left gaping at B. He recuperated a few seconds later by shaking his head and then getting into his hubby Ken stance, the taijutsu style he was taught by his summons. You wish to fight one of the legendary Sannin? He grinned evilly at his opponent. Very well, I shall indulge you. And with that, he dashed at the sun-glassed man at an intense level of speed. XXX. Nearby the destroyed camp, Sasuke had no idea who these ambushers were. But they did impress him with the slaughter of the Oto Nin that happened just a few minutes ago. Maybe he could use his Sharingan to try and make the one using that powerful jutsu teach it to him. It would certainly help in killing his older brother. His eyes scanned around him like a hawk, searching for anyone trying to ambush him. When that failed, he ended up having to sense with his chakra. It was one of the things he was taught by Orochimaru, saying it would be useful to know where his next victim would be. But he never did completely master the technique. Sure, he got it up to a decent level to where he could sense chakra signatures, but not to where he could pinpoint that signature. And that was the reason why he was standing still with dust floating around him like a ghostly shroud. The raven-haired ninja had his Sharingan activated in order to help see through the dust, since it allowed him to see chakra. All he saw was Orochimaru being sent skidding back to where he could not see by a man with a octopus arm. What kind of jutsu was that? It was during this little distraction where he suddenly felt a large chakra signature appear right behind him out of nowhere. His eyes widened and he turned around to block any possible attack coming his way. Sadly, it was too late, as the only sight he saw was four knuckles not even an inch from his face. Out of reflex, he closed his eyes and tried to lean back in order to soften the blow, but he did not feel an impact when he did. So he reopened his eyes, only for them to widen again at the person behind the fist that was still so close to his face. Surprised to see me, Tem? A certain whiskered blonde said, grinning at his opponent. Sasuke jumped back a few feet and got in a defensive stance. The tomo in his Sharingan were spinning rapidly to copy any technique thrown his way. Dobi, I see that the rumors of you being banished from Konoha were true then. He said with a smirk, trying to anger the blonde, make him slip up. Naruto just frowned instead. If you're trying to get me mad, then it won't work. I'm not how I was 6 months ago back at that hideout, Sasuke. He stood up straight and his hands were at his sides now as the dust cleared up fully. The only reaction Sasuke made was losing his smirk and raising an eyebrow at the statement. Only a few seconds later did that dreadful smirk reappear on his face. Then let's see how you face against an Uchiha with no one to help you. He yelled and began making hand signs at a rapid pace. Instantly, Naruto knew the signs for the jutsu and got into the stance he was taught to by the Kyuubi, something he was extremely grateful for, the Kitsune Ken, Fox Fist. He then began to make hand signs for a defensive jutsu he learned from his mother's scrolls. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique. Sasuke yelled before he made a circle with the index finger and the thumb of his left and breathed out. Sweden. Sujinheki, Water Release, Water Encampment Wall. The whiskered Jinchuriki called out and then finished with a clap of his hands and water building around him in a circle. It didn't even take a second for the water to erupt around him in the form of a wall. When the fireball collided with the wall of water, the result was a huge shroud of steam covering the battlefield. It was pretty thick due to the size of the fireball. Sasuke could still see Naruto's chakra signature in the steam because of his Sharingan. He was surprised to see the Dobi of all people using such a powerful jutsu to block his own. What was worse, he was too busy using his own jutsu to copy it. Those thoughts alone made him grit his teeth in frustration. But he quickly calmed himself by taking a deep breath, followed by an exhalation. Apparently, it was true to what Naruto had said in him not being the same since their last encounter. He was going to have to take this fight a little more seriously now. Naruto was using his large chakra reserves to sense Sasuke's signature, similar to that of radar. Kyuubi had also taught him this technique because it would be very useful in times like this, where a person's vision is temporarily impaired and they don't want to let the enemy get the drop on them. The blonde saw that Sasuke hadn't moved an inch whatsoever. He thought for sure the Uchiha would try to attack him with something, but he had done no such thing. I guess I'll just have to beat him to it then, Naruto thought with a grin, and then started the hand signs for his most favorite jutsu. Ranton. Reiza Sakasu, Storm Release, Laser Circus. He yelled, and the black and white beams fired out of his hands and made holes in the steam as they headed to their Sharingan-wielding target. Sasuke's eyes widened at such a jutsu being used against him and barely had enough time to dodge the attack. But, to his shock, the lasers had redirected themselves and were now heading towards him again. There was no way for him to dodge the attack while he was in the air. He was going to have to go back to basics. The steam had cleared from the battlefield and Naruto could now see clearly. As soon as he could, he saw Sasuke's body on the ground, motionless and smoking. He quickly ran over to the body, albeit cautiously, and checked for a pulse. When he touched the unconscious Uchiha's neck, the body turned to smoke and reappeared as a log. Kawarimi, substitution, Naruto thought and leaned his head to the side, barely dodging a strike from Sasuke. He grabbed the arm and then lifted Sasuke into the air, planning on slamming him to the ground. But Sasuke was able to control the momentum of his body and simply kicked Naruto in the chest with both of his feet, causing his arm to be freed and landing safely to the ground. The kick didn't seem to have affected his blonde opponent though, only making him skid back a few feet. Stop playing around with him, Naruto. This is not the time for it. Kyuubi roared to its jailer from behind the seal that was on the blonde's stomach. Hearing this made Naruto nod and took one of his hands and arched it to reach behind his back. When it met his target, which was the handle to his family sword, he grasped it and then slowly pulled it out of its sheath. Sasuke raised an eyebrow in curiosity and reached for his own sword when he saw Naruto doing the same. He was actually a little surprised to see that Naruto had a sword. Had he taken up to learning Kenjutsu? This thought made his head shake and a smirk appear on his mouth. Like someone like Naruto could learn Kenjutsu. He agreed that he was a little better than he was at Orochimaru's hideout, but the blonde was still not up to par with an Uchiha. They each took their own respective stances for their sword styles and gazed at each other, waiting for either one to make a move. The wind blew around them slowly and a small trail of dust made its path in the middle of the two. The Uchiha made the first move by narrowing his eyes and channeling Raiden chakra into his sword and causing arcs of electricity to form around it. He then charged at his adversary with a ready striking slash prepared, hoping to end this fast. Naruto countered by quickly switching to a defensive stance and parried Sasuke's slash when the attack was thrust upon him. He noticed that something had made the Uchiha's eyes widen, but he did not know what it was. So, he used that momentary lapse in concentration to his advantage and turned his blade to the side, making Sasuke's sword and arm along in the same direction. Then, he used the speed he spent months on increasing to slash Sasuke relentlessly. They were only shallow cuts though, because even though he would not hesitate to kill the traitor, he still wanted to uphold a promise to one of his precious people. So, for now, he would settle for at least knocking the Uchiha out. However, Sasuke had regained his footing and began blocking the blonde's attacks, if only barely. The strikes of the black blade were so fast that even his Sharingan, with 3 tomo no less, had trouble keeping up with the movements. Now, their swords were grinding against each other and the sparks sporadically shot off of Sasuke's sword while this happened. The raven-haired Uchiha was gritting his teeth as he looked at the face of his former friend, who was holding him off quite easily. Knowing that he couldn't get best the blonde in strength, he pushed away from Naruto and made some distance in order to collect himself. The cuts that he was now adorned with stung and would have made him wince had he not known worse pain. His sensei was Orochimaru after all. Pain tolerance was a must in becoming his apprentice. How are you so strong? Sasuke yelled in anger as his Sharingan was blazing. Naruto remained silent as he straightened his back into a more relaxed stance. I told you I wasn't the same since we last met at the hideout. He retorted. Shut up. It's not possible for you to have become so strong in a few months. I'm an Uchiha. No one should be able to beat me. The Uchiha yelled again as his breathing became more rapid because of his anger. The blonde sighed at this proclamation. There's that arrogance again. Just because you're an Uchiha doesn't make you unstoppable, Sasuke. Your big brother knew this before what he did to your clan. Why can't you see the same? Sasuke roared in anger and sheathed his sword in one quick motion. He then made 3 hand signs and then pointed his palm to the ground and focused his chakra into his palm. Suddenly, his entire hand was enveloped in electricity and a loud screeching noise was emanating from it. It was one of his signature jutsu, the Chidori. Naruto narrowed his eyes at this and lightly tossed his sword from his right hand to his left and then formed a Rasengan in the now empty hand. Don't do this, Sasuke. You know I can beat you. He yelled at the traitor and got ready to launch himself forward. The Uchiha didn't listen as he quickly dashed at Naruto, who also did the same, and their jutsu collided with each other. The two powerful techniques were struggling against each other to prove which one was more dominant. Back and forth the jutsu had gone several times in order to win this battle of strength. Sasuke was actually confident that he would win this because he had done so all those years ago. His gritted teeth turned into that of a maniacal grin as he pushed with all his might against Naruto's opposing technique. Now, the Chidori was merely a few inches away from Naruto, who closed his eyes and then opened them suddenly to reappear with crimson irises and slit pupils. He growled as he pushed the Rasengan with more power and chakra and completely overwhelmed the Chidori. His jutsu broken, Sasuke was sent flying back in a pinwheel motion and only stopped because of the giant boulder that was in the landscape, only with a human-sized crater now imprinted on it. Sasuke fell out of the crater with a pained groan and landed on his knees. He then began to breathe hard because he was trying to get air into his lungs, the Rasengan having hit him in the stomach. He looked up to see Naruto, who still had his hand extended and was now standing regularly like before. He glared at the blonde in hate, trying to bore a hole into his skull and kill him. The effort was wasted though because his small wish did not come true. The Sharingan wielder then got up to stand and struggled to do so. He might not have really liked Orochimaru at all, but he was definitely glad that he was trained to take damage. But he knew that he couldn't keep taking this much or he would surely lose. Now do you see, Sasuke? Naruto asked as he looked down at the Uchiha who was using his knees now in order to stay up. The difference between us, I can kill you if I wanted to right now and end this. But, I have a promise that I made, and I don't skip out on my promises if I can help it. The blonde was now walking over to his former rival friend. Hearing this, Sasuke smirked again. This is what this is all about. You are trying to bring me back to Konoha. He began to laugh wickedly as his body became covered in black. Naruto stopped when he saw this and mentally sighed. He knew what Sasuke was doing now. He was using the Ten no Juin, cursed seal of heaven, to transform to his level 2 state. Sasuke's skin became a darker shade, closer to that of gray, and his hair grew longer without losing the same style. His eyes were no longer black but were a bright yellow with the 3 tomo spinning wildly like before. A black, cross-like mark appeared on his face, directly over his nose. The last thing that happened in the transformation was the 2 giant, hand-shaped wings that sprouted out of his shoulder blades and extended in a motion that made him look like his was about to take off like a bird. I will never let you take me back to Konoha, Naruto. Sasuke yelled and looked to be good as new in his transformed state. He straightened up and it would be discovered by Naruto that all of his previous cuts and injuries were gone now. Rapid regeneration. That didn't happen at the Valley of the End, this was unexpected. Naruto thought to himself as he got back into his sword stance. I can still win this, but I don't think I'll be able to bring him back to Konoha. I'm sorry, Sakura-chan. Sasuke took to the air and flew to a far range that Naruto could not reach, even with his jutsu. What was he planning was the thought that the blonde was having at the moment. Then, he saw the now transformed Uchiha doing multiple Kaden jutsu into the clouds that were gathered in the sky. Each cloud was absorbing the fire somehow and was now turning black. Thunder could be heard from them and lightning arced around at various times after a few more minutes of this routine that Sasuke was doing. Now, all the clouds above Naruto were thunder clouds and he still had no idea why his adversary was doing this. Was it for one of his jutsu? It definitely wasn't one that he recognized. It must have been during the 3 years of training with Orochimaru. In the sky, Sasuke was laughing to himself in a roar of derangement. This jutsu will end this battle and take out anyone nearby. He then raised his right hand toward the clouds and used his left to do the hand signs. One-handed signs were something he learned after seeing Haku do them back in his genin days. Kirin. Sasuke had yelled and the lightning in the clouds gathered together in a large amount and took on the form of some type of animal that was not discernible at the moment. It roared loudly and then faced down when Sasuke thrust his palm to the blonde. That was when it launched itself out of the sky and headed at its designated target, Naruto. The whiskered Jinchuriki knew he only had a little time to react, but the alternative was to become fried in electricity. So, gathering his chakra around himself as quickly as he could, he activated his Raiden no Yoroi, lightning release armor. The armor appeared in a golden color with blue arcs of lightning dancing across it. His eyes glowed white as he looked at the beast and then spread his arms and legs that made him look like an eagle. When the lightning creature connected, a large and powerful wave of force spanned over the mountainous terrain and sent any unexpected wildlife to be sent flying away to distances unknown. But there was no explosion, which Sasuke noticed even from the sky. Now that confused him. This was his most powerful jutsu in his arsenal and was extremely destructive. So why was there no explosion occurring like it did when he practiced with it so many times before? It didn't take long before a bright, white light flashed over the area where Naruto was standing and the wave of force had completely and suddenly disappeared. Sasuke closed his eyes when the light came, as it was too bright for him, and waited for it to die down. After it did, he reopened his yellow eyes only for them to widen at what he saw below him. It was only thanks to his Sharingan that he could see this at all. There stood Naruto completely unharmed from the jutsu and was still in his Raiden no Yoroi. Only it was much larger now and circled around him in a wide radius. He looked up at Sasuke with a sad look on his face as he sheathed his blade and pointed both of his palms at the flying traitor. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, Sasuke. I hope you find peace in the afterlife," he thought and then yelled out as his armor glowed and then, in another flash, the technique that Sasuke and flung at the blonde was now coming back towards its creator. Sasuke had no chance of dodging the jutsu and merely looked at it in astonishment. How could this have happened? How did Naruto redirect such a powerful jutsu to him? His questions would not be able to be answered as he knew this was the end. He closed his eyes when Kirin was no less than a few feet away from him. So this is how I die, he thought, and the jutsu completely enveloped him as he screamed one last time before his body completely disappeared from the sky. Naruto deactivated his armor and a tear made a path down his whiskered cheek. Even though Sasuke was a traitor, he was still his first friend that he ever made. He may not have showed it back then, but he thought of the Avenger as a brother. But that Sasuke was long gone ever since he had tried to kill him at the valley. He wasn't the same person, he was replaced with a dark and murderous person only bent on power. But he would still miss the memories he shared with Sasuke before that happened. With a sigh, he wiped the tear from his face and then went back to a serious expression. He turned back to where he sensed the others were fighting and began to make his way towards Samui and Yugito, seeing as how he could take care of himself. Sasuke was surprised when Naruto blocked the Kusanagi with his sword because it isn't supposed to be blocked by normal means. The Kusanagi was supposed to go through Naruto's sword and cut him, not be blocked. This will be explained at another time.